So, no big deal, but I kinda helped you out real big time there.
You are too kind, Commander, but I would not expect you to help me out of the kindness of your heart. I also have one more thing to give you, if you are interested.
One more thing? Oh, hell yeah!
Close your eyes and relax, Commander.
Alright, we're taking a trip back memory lane, back to one of my favorite games. That's right, the original Mass Effect. While a pretty heavy story-based game, a lot of the gameplay revolves around the third-person shooter mechanics, which feel pretty comfortable. You can move around fairly well. The aim sights seem to work well. A bit of the cover-based mechanics were a bit lacking. You could crouch behind cover and do things like that, but not really as precise as some of the other third-person shooter games out there at the time. The addition of the cool powers that you could use using your biotics or tech abilities was a cool addition to the third-person shooter formula, serving kind of as like a special type of grenade weapon that you could use kind of progressively throughout the game. They were very fun to use. What I found though was that the cooldown on them was quite long for the kind of payoff that you could get from them. Oftentimes there were larger groups of enemies that you could use it once on, and it was often more effective to use your weapons. So they were fun and had great effects, but would have liked to find a way to get a little bit more use out of them. Dialogue tree in Mass Effect was fairly clear and easy to use. You just pick the option you want and you click. It was a short description about what your character would say, but often it matched up pretty well, and they had the Renegade and Paragon system that kind of determining between a good and evil, or kind of a good and determined response that you could choose from often in your dialogue. And this system worked fairly well and often made for interesting stories and conversations to keep things fresh and kind of give you some plot and kind of a break between these bouts of combat.
You've been given a unique position to represent our race. Is there anything you'd like to say about it?
What kind of a question is that?
Some have said your appointment is the Citadel throwing humans a bone. You really do believe that, don't you?
Listen, f*** you!
You bitch!
The enemy AI seems to work fairly well. They seem to spread out and try to flank you at times and use the cover well to stay hidden, but do give the player opportunities to find and pick them off and shoot them. And there are varied enemy types to keep things fresh, so it's not just the same grunts you're shooting over and over again. There are larger enemies that offer large kind of blast type attacks, snipers, up close and personal enemies, large big hulkers, walking minions, all sorts of varied enemy types that kind of push the player to change up their strategy a little bit, maybe push them out of cover or have them sit back into cover and take pot shots from a distance. A lot of different ways to approach these varied enemies, which tries to keep the gameplay and the levels fairly interesting. The biotics, tech, and combat kind of trio combination with you and your two squad mates as you go out on adventures is a pretty solid base to build gameplay from, making you make choices about who you bring with you based on your playstyle and whatever complements your style the best. Sometimes different situations are going to call for a different type of attack, which means you can tailor your squad based on what you expect is upcoming. If you know that there's a lot of biotic enemies coming up, then perhaps you can bring your tech buddies with you to take out their shields and barriers and then use your combat to finish them off. You have those types of choices, even if a little bit minorly, but they do exist in the game and are pretty satisfying when it pays off the way you intended it to. The weapons, upgrades, and commerce kind of systems, all the loot-based and kind of the purchasing of stuff is not a strong point in this game. It's very hard and non-user-friendly to use the upgrades to your weapons and to your armor. It's tough to distinguish what you have. There's these huge lists. You often have duplicates, and you've got to kind of sub between your different teammates and take one off one and give it to the other. It takes a while. You got to take it off and give them a new one, switch over into the new menu and go over it. Just a little bit time consuming for what is seemingly kind of a simple operation. And as well, the commerce system, by the time you're kind of at least halfway or 3/4 through the game, you have a shitload of money and not a lot of stuff to buy with it. So it kind of makes you curious, well, why do I have money? What is there to buy? Do I buy cool weapons, but I'm picking them up as I go? Do I sell? I have tons of money because I've done all these quests. It's seemingly pointless why they included some of that stuff in the game in the current state that it is. The character progression system, however, is a favorite of mine, not necessarily the strongest part of the game, but does give you options of which types of things to pursue and level up your character that do make you incrementally stronger as you level up. If you do more side missions, you'll get more experience, and you can level up things like your weapon damage, your power damage, your cooldown time, and unlock specialties and new things by using this progression system. If you do more side missions, you will become stronger and that much more ready to fight the stronger challenges later in the game. But the game is still completable even if you just do the bare bones and don't explore everything. This kind of gives a reason to explore and do the side missions, meaning you can soup up your character and explore the other avenues. For example, you can unlock proficiencies in other weapons or different new powers that you can unlock by upgrading a different power. This allows you to kind of have a reason for going out and pursuing more experience and more missions. Yeah. One of the main critiques that I hear about Mass Effect is that it had a pretty decent start with that first mission where you come down and there's a lot of combat, you get a bit of story mixed in there, it's pretty well balanced, but then it's followed by a lengthy just run and talk section at the Citadel when you kind of enter and are just talking to everybody. There's a bit of combat in there, but for the most part it's just going to be running around this large area that you don't know much about, just talking to people. The story in Mass Effect has some real strong points. It's an interesting world, an interesting concept. Humans have entered the galactic space and learned inter-solar system travel and faster than light travel, and we've entered kind of the galactic political scene. There's all these races who you get to know different intricacies of their race and culture, all the new tech. It's a very interesting setting for a quality story. As well, there are varied and interesting characters, your squad mates, other characters that you meet along the way with their own strengths and weaknesses. Often in games like this, you'll see a lot of characters who are just kind of based on their strengths and what they're good at, which ends up being very surface level. In Mass Effect, what I really appreciated was a lot of these characters, they played on both their strengths and their weaknesses so that they seemed a little bit more relatable and much more interesting to get to know. There are huge moments, sad moments, funny moments, interesting moments, sexy moments, awkward moments, all sorts of varied moments that are big and feel great in Mass Effect that just draw you in and really charm you and immerse you in this world. Characters' goals are clear and the stakes are very high, making everything that you do feel like it has some relevant context to the story, not just doing pointless random things. Some of the side missions can feel that way, but all of the story missions have that tone of this is epic, this needs to be done, I'm being counted on, the world, the galaxy is at stake and this must get done, creating a really epic story. The other real quality piece about this story is that there's various choices for you to make throughout your journey as Commander Shepard that start to form Shepard's personality and the different things that have happened in the history, which makes you feel like you're developing your Shepard, that this isn't just some random character you're playing and making a bunch of random decisions for them. It starts to feel like you are playing the part of this character and it's unique to you. I've talked to a lot of people who've also played this game and we discussed the different choices we made and the different dialogue things that we said, and it ended up feeling like we were playing as two different characters when they were really both Commander Shepard, which I think is something quite special that's hard to really capture when you make story-based games like this. The level designs where your missions will take place, I think, are fairly well done. There's ample cover for you to hide behind and different objects strewn throughout the world that are based on where they take place, whether it's debris or different, tables, whatever it is. It makes sense given the context, but the combat areas are very clearly laid out. So even if you don't see the enemies, you kind of get the feeling that maybe some combat's going to start soon, so you are on guard and you're never really surprised by an enemy attack or ambush and that can get kind of frustrating. Oftentimes in these missions I noted that there's sort of a bit of a circular / linear level design to some of these levels. You progress through the area as you go kind of on a linear path through to reach your final destination, whether you're infiltrating a base to get access to something. But the game always has you kind of exit and circle back through a small section of the level where often, and for story purposes, something has changed. Either something's been destroyed, something leaves, or an enemy or a boss shows up, having you go through a familiar part of the level with a new twist, which I think is a really creative way to reuse various level spaces that they've drawn up, but also kind of help players' familiarity with the area and not get lost. Oh, I've already been through here, so I know I'm going back out. It's very clear, and I think the level design definitely serves navigation and some big story moments. I think compared to the combat and mission areas, I think the story areas are a little bit less elegant, and for example, the Citadel is really sprawled out. Everything is very far away. It takes a little bit of time to run between these spaces. Yeah, there's the fast travel, but if you don't know what you're doing and haven't spent a lot of time there, it's a little bit easy to get lost, and with all the different names and new things that are thrown at you at once that early in the game, it's a little bit of a jarring experience. I'm not sure where to go. Maybe there's some side quests here, but I'm a little bit overwhelmed potentially. So, and some of the other story areas in the game I think are a little bit less eloquently drawn out and more just a place to place NPCs and quest markers rather than kind of the artistic and interesting design ways that they've laid out the combat areas. It's no secret that the presentation in Mass Effect has not aged well. The graphics have not aged well and could really use an update. Would love to see a Mass Effect trilogy revamped or remastered. That would be awesome, because I would love to see this game over again with the high fidelity and HD graphics. Unfortunately, the current version, the older version, leaves a lot to be desired. It's pretty grainy. Some of the lighting effects don't really work that well. On PC, there's some areas where you get glitched and you kind of have to do some console commands to kind of avoid some of the strange lighting effects. The voice and facial animation seem to work well for the time, and the voice acting is very well done with some quality voice actors who really help to draw you and invest you in those characters. As well, there's a phenomenal soundtrack in Mass Effect, one of the most memorable soundtracks in any game I've played. It's got this weird kind of space sci-fi vibe that really draws you in. It's almost kind of got a curious feel to it, and often in the right contexts, some of the songs that play and make you really want to dance. Hey, you want to dance? Me? No? No? Alright. Overall, Mass Effect is one of my personal favorite games, and I love the series as a whole. The first edition was kind of a solid entry, more of an action RPG than some of its predecessors, but I think it did leave a lot to be desired, and some of the things and issues that happen in this game, they did address and change up in later editions of the game. But here, if you were to go back and play Mass Effect, there are some things that can be a little bit frustrating, but overall, I think given the solid third-person shooter mechanics and the real quality storytelling and immersion and the whole presentation of Mass Effect is one that is really well done, and I hope will stand the test of time. So for that reason, my final verdict for Mass Effect is an 8 out of 10. It's a great game. I would love to give this game a 10 out of 10. It's one of my favorite series. I usually replay it every few years and have a blast doing it every time. It's good for laughs, emotion, lots of fun, quality gameplay, but for all the things that I look back and look critically at, it does pull it back a little bit, and it does leave room for improvement, which the company did with some of its sequels. Well, that's it for Mass Effect. Thank you guys for watching the video and staying all through the way to the end. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button, subscribe to Yes Guy Gaming, take a look at some of the other reviews we've got out there, and Let's Plays and all the cool stuff we have on this channel. I would really, really appreciate that. But thank you again so much for watching, and we hope to see you next time on Yes Guy Gaming.